St. Luke's Gospel has been called by some the most beautiful book ever written. It contains what we recognize as the heart of the Christmas story, as well as the parables of the Good Samaritan and the prodigal son, the stories of the Annunciation to Mary and her visitation to her cousin Elizabeth. Even Luke's Passion narrative portrays Jesus as a brave hero and the best example of his own teachings. The cures of Simon's mother-in-law, the leper, the centurion's servant, and others, and the raising back to life of the son of the widow of Nain and Jairus' daughter, all affirm Jesus' mission to reach out to the lost, the last, and the least, to comfort the afflicted. But today's gospel that we just heard presents an almost unrecognizable Lucan Jesus who utters three initially puzzling sayings. Jesus proclaims that he has come to light a fire on the earth, to undergo a second baptism, this time a baptism of death, and to bring division rather than peace. What happened to those angels singing about peace on earth and Jesus being the Prince of Peace? Instead, we have an image of Jesus in a reverse role, not comforting the afflicted, but rather afflicting the comfortable. Now, the fire which Jesus speaks of is nothing new. It's an image for God's presence from the very beginning to the end of the Bible, from God calling Moses from the burning bush that is on fire but not consumed, and then leading the Israelites in the wilderness as a pillar of fire, down to the tongues of fire over the heads of the disciples at Pentecost. The final verse, 29, of the 12th chapter of the letter to the Hebrews, which was the source of our second reading today, proclaims, "Our God is a consuming fire." Good religion is about being on fire with the love of God and setting people on fire with life and love and service. It is about liberation and setting people free to live in the Spirit of Christ. Religious faith should be something exciting and energizing, putting us on fire and setting us free. But all too often, it is exactly the opposite. The author, Deborah Dean Murphy, delivers a scathing critique of contemporary Christian worship, which she says dumbs down the faith and fits the dramatic claims of Christ into the limitations of our consumer culture. She writes this, quote, "The market-driven character of much of our worship, the dumbing down of the church's historic liturgy, the thoughtless capitulation of Christians to consumer capitalism, the extolling of managerial models of ecclesial leadership, the view of the church as a promoter of family values and defender of abstract principles of love, justice, and freedom, the facile identification of Christianity and nationalism, the failure to train the imaginations of the young, the devolving of rigorous Christian discourse into pious sentimentality, and the growing trend across Christian traditions toward a vacuous, generic, benign, pop spirituality." Yikes. That hardly sounds like the description of faith whose God is a consuming fire, does it? Now, Murphy wrote that almost 20 years ago. It's not hard to assume that in the following two decades, things have only gotten much worse. This is not the faith described in today's reading, the faith of Jeremiah and the faith of Jesus, the faith that involves risk that can cause tension and even division, a faith that got Jeremiah thrown into a muddy cistern to die because he continued to remind the Israelites of their infidelities toward God. In the gospel, Jesus delivers a message to another audience that does not want to hear. His message of justice and peace, respect for all people, and dedication to faithful worship of a righteous God was not welcomed by many. His word caused and continues to cause conflict among families and friends. His message that threatens those with power, prestige, with status and security, with comfort and control, is still alive today. A message that is both universal and timeless. a message now entrusted to us, as our second reading from the letter to the Hebrews makes clear. We are now the ones who are called to run the race as so many others have done before us. We are called to follow the example of Jesus, not to give up when the going gets tough. The final victory of Jesus over sin and death encourages us to keep our eyes on him and not despair when we face conflict, adversity, injustice. For our God is faithful and will never abandon us. It is this trust that enables Jesus to accept his second baptism, this time not at the hands of his cousin John, but a baptism on the cross, a baptism of death. Following Jesus' invitation faithfully, we risk a similar baptism. But in the immortal words of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, that is the cost of discipleship. Our commitment to Jesus needs to shape our priorities, our goals, what we value, and how we behave. The obvious question for each one of us must be, how much does my Christian faith cost me? Does my claiming to be a follower of Jesus Christ have any impact on my daily life? Do I allow the words of the gospel to get inside of me and light a fire in my belly? Our faith must not be an empty ritual. Our faith calls us to live and to act differently than we would if we did not know and love Jesus. Our religion calls us to speak for justice, to serve the poor, and to work for the liberation of the oppressed, to be a light in the darkness, to be on fire with faith, hope, and love. I would like to close our reflection with an example of some people who have done just that. People who are not famous or have positions of great power, people who are our neighbors, people who are members of our faith community right here at St. Joseph University Parish. A few weeks ago, there was a terrible racially motivated massacre of 10 people in a supermarket just a few miles from here. It could have been just another of the hundreds of senseless shootings that occur in our country every year. But this time, our Parish Gun Violence Awareness Committee, one of several social justice subcommittees of our parish, swung into action. The committee had already been actively trying to have gun-related magazines removed from supermarket shelves. But this horrific event motivated them even more. They thought, enough is enough. No, enough is too much. The committee numbers about 20 members, and they were directed by a steering committee of about 5 members to create a campaign to address the proliferation of gun-related magazines in our local supermarkets. Magazines like Gun Digest, Handgunner, Ballistic Best, Concealed Carry and Self-Defense, and many, many others. Through rigorous phone calls, letters, and petitions, they were able to persuade the 2 largest local supermarket chains, Tops and Wegmans, and now the local Barnes & Noble bookstores, to remove all of these magazines from their sales racks. A victory? Yes. A victory for peace, justice, and the memory of those who lost their lives a few weeks ago. Did it cost them something? Of course. Time, energy, frustration. But they were willing to pay the price, a price that has made all the difference, a difference that would never have come to pass without their faith, without their commitment. We heard Jesus said, I came to cast fire upon the earth, and would that it were already kindled. May that fire be in all of us, so that in large and small ways, each of us, in our own time and in our own place, can make a difference.